Maybe don't know.
This time to build. This time to build power. This time to build power. This time to build power. This time to build power.
What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Chris Hampton. Welcome to episode... Honestly, I have no idea what episode it is, and I'm just going to stop trying to keep up with it. We're almost to 250. We'll pass it before I know it. So, welcome to the Power Company Podcast, brought to you by PowerCompanyClimbing.com. I am still sitting on a rooftop in downtown Chicago, very windy downtown Chicago, which has been amazing. I've spent my mornings out here drinking coffee and preparing for a day of going to art museums and just exploring the city with my daughter, my granddaughter, and my wife. And it's been fantastic. I needed the time away from small town Wyoming. This has been perfect. It's overcast, gray, drizzly, windy, loud, everything I needed it to be. Many of you have heard of the Climb United route name task force. When it was announced that this was going to be a thing, the community uproared. I don't know that there's another way to say it. Lots of opinions flying around, and rightfully so. This is a community, and we should be engaging in these things. Today's guest, Cody Kaemmerlen, is the director of Climb United. I had not met Cody before this conversation. We sat down in the courtyard at the front in Salt Lake City, also with my friend Mario Stanley, who you'll hear in here as well. And a quick look at Cody's LinkedIn profile reveals this bio. Lives by simple beliefs. Advocate for the underrepresented and oppressed. Use your privilege with honor and be aggressively kind. More than anyone I've ever met, Cody lives by these words. He's a passionate advocate for what he believes in, somehow without coming off as pushy. And as soon as I saw his name announced as director for this initiative, I knew I needed to talk to him. So let's get into it.
Maybe don't know.
If you don't make a decision to be happy and to be hopeful and be joyful, then you're not going to seek those things out, those moments, those peoples, those communities, those areas that allow that for you.
Cody, I was listening to some of your old podcast episodes, and I listened to your New Year's episode that was came out on January 7th, 2020. And it was so full of hope and love and excitement for what was coming. Have you held on to that through 2020?
That's such a good question. Yeah, I have. Because I think the pure joy and privilege to be part of the climbing community really gave me a lot to hold on to and gave me a lot of folks to look to for hope. And I think the shortest way I can put that is there are a lot of examples of inspiration, I think, in this community. Folks who have been around for a while, have been doing this sport for a long time, who have overcome a lot to be able to continue to be part of the community. And it's cool to have stories like that in our sport and have those folks still be around and to get to meet them and talk with them and get to know them. I think it helps a lot.
Yeah, when I listened to it, I got the feeling that we're just meeting for the first time.
Yeah.
And I got the feeling from listening to that episode that it would continue, that there was a sincerity, an authenticity to that hopefulness that had taken into account all of our failings as a community, all of the amazing parts of our community, and had just accepted that this is the community. And you were already at that time searching for a change that so many people have just started looking for in the last year. Where did that search come from? Where did the hope of a change come from prior to the pandemic, the Black Lives Matter movement becoming a bigger thing? Where did that come from?
I've always had a growth mindset, even before I knew the term and was able to call it that. As a kid, I don't want to go back too far and take too much time, but as a youngster growing up in a transracial family as a transracial adoptee, there was always this sense that like I didn't know my history, my lineage, right? Like you go to a family reunion, which were big where I grew up and in the family I grew up in, and everyone could talk about like, oh, it's great that my sister Emily looks like, my parents, or you can see the resemblances, and I didn't have that. And so instead of like be down about that, I decided, well, I can recreate my own story time and time again, because I don't have a backstory. And so I think when you're always looking to grow and to change, you're always hopeful, right? There's always something that I don't want to say is necessarily better, but is different, and that can allow you to learn new lessons, understand the world in a different way, understand yourself in a different way, and how you navigate the world and what that looks like, and redefine what success might be. It could be that I try this thing, I try out this career, this style of climbing, something like that, and then I move on and I find something different. And then to kind of like directly answer it, maybe in not such a poetic rambling way.
I like your poetic rambling though, by the way.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So you know.
I have had experiences in my life, for example, my divorce, some pretty traumatic climate accidents that I had to find hope, because you're only existing in darkness when things are really, really, really bad. And if you don't make a decision, and I hate to make it sound this simple because it's not, but if you don't make a decision to be happy and to be hopeful and be joyful, then you're not going to seek those things out, those moments, those peoples, those communities, those areas that allow that for you. So it has to be a very intentional choice, but also a very vulnerable choice to say, I'm not happy, I'm not doing the right thing, and I have to learn how to be okay with that. Otherwise, I can't find what the right thing. And if I see the right thing, I might not even recognize it if I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, I love that. There's, when you're coming into a new community, when did you start climbing?
Only between 5 and 6 years ago.
Okay, I thought it was relatively recent.
Yeah.
In comparison to I've been here for 100 years. But when you're coming into a new community, I think oftentimes there's not an immediate like, oh, I want to change this community. It's more, I want to fit in with this community. And I think that sort of assimilation is very often a survival technique, a way to want to feel a part of something. What made you feel like I know I can change this community? I want to help change this community. I want to lead this community into change, instead of maybe this isn't the community I thought it was, and doing the work is just going to be too much.
Deep cut right away. I had already assimilated in my life as an Asian American. I had assimilated really hard until my 20s. It ended in terrible relationships, terrible relationship with myself, and a lot of just really toxic practices in my life, and I just felt disconnected from my ostensible identity, right? And so, going through that, it showed me like how damaging assimilation is. So if you get into a community, right, going into climbing, there are these strange assimilations you make no matter who you are. I feel like when you first start climbing, you have to go buy the right clothing. You start researching the brands, spend a lot of money on making sure everything's right, like gates out, gates in, like how do you climb, right? All these things.
Yeah.
And then you look around you and you start to see that there are a lot of folks who come from varied backgrounds, whether that's seen or unseen, right? And they're starting to almost clump themselves into smaller communities, which is great. We're finding folks that have the same lived experiences, but we're losing something. It was when Sam Crossley mentioned to me that, him not being able to talk to people about being gay, that they missed a chance to learn something about him.
Yeah.
That resonated so deep, because if we don't try to bring the community together and say, like, assimilation is not the answer, understanding our differences and embracing those is the answer. If we don't do that, we miss the opportunity to learn something about one another. And I mean, we're at the crag, we're in the gym, we're sharing ledges. There's so many opportunities. Like, the three of us would not be sitting here if it weren't for climbing. And if we don't lean into that and say, like, hell yeah, this community is inclusive, but we can be better, then we're missing such an opportunity, I think, to lead for the outdoor industry and for our communities and be better neighbors and citizens and coworkers and so on.
It's interesting and warms my cold little heart a little bit that somebody who's five or 6 years in is willing to care enough about this community to take that role, to want to lead into, frankly, scary places to try and usher in a different type of change. As somebody who's been in this industry for 100 years, I could very easily fit in with the old guard who's not willing to change, or I can try to fit in or try to be a part of the new age and trying to usher in change. And I think I'm only comfortable going to the side of the new age because I've been around so long. I don't know if I would be sturdy enough 5 years in to say, I want to lead this. So yeah. I commend you hugely for that.
I appreciate that, because my biggest fear is that, folks in the old guard would be like, fuck this guy. Like, he's not been around long enough. He's not seen enough of this to know how it works. And I've had some indicators that that's not the case. And I've had some indicators that that is the case.
Sure.
But, I'm of that mind where it's like, you don't enter a room just to leave because you don't like the conversation that's happening in there. Oh, yeah. And I came into this sport full on. I mean, I just jumped right in, and, I've only been climbing 5 years, but the volume I've been able to climb because of my socioeconomic privileges has been much more than 5 years. It was just endless amounts of climbing since the first day I went to a gym. And so I was able to see a lot of community and be a part of things that I don't think a lot of folks who have only been around 5 years have been able to be. So hopefully that lends me a little bit more, I don't want to say agency, but at least experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely a personal concern I have is, yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about Climb United and what it is, how it came to be? And we've got Mario Stanley here. Are you on the board?
I was part of the
groups?
task force, so
Okay.
that was I believe that was what it was. It was the task force, and it was mainly asking my thoughts, my opinions. They would bring forth proposals. We would read them, right back about them, and so it was interesting and kind of see this whole process work out. I want to piggyback on something you said though, and this is just my personal opinion, maybe not that, but like haters are always going to hate, so fuck those people anyway. So you just go on with your bad self, because there's always going to be haters. And no matter what, even allies, people that you like, someone's always going to be there to hate. So I admire you and I'm inspired. So I just want to say that. Like,
Well, I feel the same way about both of you sitting right here. I mean, and that's the thing, like, right? I mean, I know it's an old adage, but if people don't hate you, you're not pushing hard enough.
amen to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
mean, I don't
live
want to
by
be
that for sure.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So there was a big controversy necessarily started this past summer 2020 about route names that are offensive versus oppressive, racist, sexist, whatever it might be that offends a group of people. And immediately it became this conversation that was damn near impossible to have, because it's so hard to parse out what's offensive, what's oppressive, where do we draw that line? Are we blocking people's freedom of speech? Are we, what's happening here? And it's such a tricky conversation. And when I saw that there was what was initially called a task force, I think that term has been removed. Is that right?
We're still calling it the task force,
Okay.
actually, yeah.
Okay. So when I saw that there was a task force created, I was like, wow, this is a massive undertaking, but I'm so glad that somebody is doing it, is trying to do it. And in watching the first kind of town hall that you did on YouTube, I saw it on YouTube. It was, you, Nina,
Matt Semmett, Fred Knapp, and then Mitsu Wasaki.
Matt, Mitsu, yeah. So quite a few big voices, thoughtful voices in there. It occurred to me that if I were in the position of any of those people, I don't think I could be. I would like to think I could be, but I'm not so sure I could consider other people's opinions on it as much as everyone on that board did, because I have such strong opinions of my own, and I'm sure you have strong opinions of your own. How are you trying to draw that line? Not where are you drawing the line, but how are you personally taking in and disseminating all this information to be able to draw the line between offensive, oppressive, what means what should get changed? How's that look? I know this is the giant question, but
Yeah, no, it is. And first, I do want to say I appreciate, the comment about the way that everyone that was part of that panel was able to kind of conduct themselves, and not kind of was able to conduct themselves. It really makes me happy to hear that, because that's kind of an element of Climb United that we want to bring every time we show up to have a conversation, in that we have done so much work behind the scenes and had so many conversations across our differing opinions, which, and Fred would be fine with me sharing this because we're open about it. He and I met in pretty utter disagreement with one another on how to go forward with these things. And there was a point where I thought, oh shit, I don't know if we're going to be able to do this. And after several, multi-hour long phone calls, we were making plans to climb together, which we did. Ended up doing that when I was out there, out in Colorado. And that's what we're trying to bring in, is that ability to listen authentically, to be authentic and listen to one another, and have those really, really tough conversations. I know people like to talk about like your growth edge or the hard conversations, but these conversations are fucking hard. They are tough.
I'm sure.
And like you said, yeah, like all of us sitting here have really strong opinions. And so like trying to determine what that line is, for me, it has been a lot of understanding what someone's, like, the root cause of their thinking is. For example, if we're trying to like determine what's offensive versus what's discriminatory, there is information that lends itself to that. But then there are folks who will say, well, they're one and the same. Words don't have meanings. And so it's having those conversations with people that exist on polar opposites. For example, I was talking to some people after the Route Name Town Hall that completely oppose this work. And they think that folks should be able to say anything they want and that words don't have meaning. Yet when I ask them, okay, would you use these words? Like, well, I wouldn't do it. Like, so there you've now admitted that it has a meaning that you don't want to be held to.
Right.
You know, and they leave that conversation because they know that they're kind of talking shit. And then you get to the fact that they want to protect free speech, which I'm like, okay, now that's a real conversation. And so it's almost like little tests along the way and like those data inputs of like, what would somebody be willing to say and what would they not? And most of those words on the list of discriminatory words, even people who are against this work are like, well, I would never use that. Like, so there's like one little piece of data that suggests that this word is in fact oppressive or discriminatory. If we want to talk about offensive, that's, well, we could probably talk for years and get nowhere on that. That's a whole different thing.
Right. So currently is the task force thinking that offensive routes should stay, but oppressive or discriminatory routes should be considered for change?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Right now, our stance is that we should rethink discriminatory route names, and offensive, unfortunately, are going to have to be left just to public. And there are organizations that we've been talking to that are dealing in that. They're gathering public information. Folks can submit a route and explain why it's offensive, and they'll put that into a cycle of review. We're not part of that, but we certainly are starting to engage with those people and see what that looks like, and if there's ways that we can support their cause.
One thing I appreciate that came out in that town hall was the clarification of you can name a route whatever you want to name it. Nobody's saying don't name your routes these things. They're saying we want to hold our publishing of these names, whether it's online in print form, to a higher standard for the sake of the community. So if you and your friends want to call it whatever you want to call it, go for it. We are going to put in place some form of protection for the members of our community who might be discriminated against by this name. And I think that's really important for people to keep in mind.
Yeah, you summed it up perfectly. And I'm glad we're recording, so I'll probably steal that and put that in print somewhere. Borrow it, I should say. Borrow it. But
free to borrow.
But that's exactly right. Yeah, we're certainly not telling people how to think, what to say, right? It's just allowing or encouraging. Maybe allowing or encouraging, not the right words. Trying to find the right word right now. You know what? I'm not even going to try. You said it perfectly. I'll just botch it. You can cut that rambling out or not. You can leave it in. I'm good with either.
No, I've read a lot of the comments on Instagram posts, Facebook posts, and I've seen them on my own posts. The internet can be a really toxic place.
Yeah.
When anyone can just say anything, hit a button, and not think about what they're saying. They're just reacting. But I think those posts, those comments, those immediate reactions do give us a lens into what the greater community, maybe not the greater community, but what a portion of the community feels like, how they hold the, air quotes, history in a certain place in their heart, in their life, whether we think it's misplaced or not. And a lot of people think we're trying to erase history by suggesting names are changed. Thoughts on that?
A lot. I think you hit it on the head when you said air quotes history.
Yeah.
Right? Because if we really as a community want to go back in history, then everything that's ever been named would have to be rechanged. It would have to go back to the indigenous landowners, right? The folks who have been here before any of us were even a thought. And these areas have indigenous names. These rocks are sacred. They're ancestral. They are ancestors. I mean, there are so many things that we could go back to, and I'm probably not even getting all of that accurate because I'm not as educated on this conversation as I need to be. And that's in process. But we're not, to put it back into the lens of route names in climbing as they stand right now in our modern time, we're not, stripping the first ascensionist of the work or the, if they weren't the same person that bolted it, we're not taking any of that away. We're certainly not changing the history of the sport or activity by suggesting and asking folks if they would like to change a name. We're simply ensuring that everybody who is part of the sport today, that we're fostering a more welcoming community. Mm-hmm. Because it is already, if you ask me, quite inclusive and quite welcoming, which means we can get there in our lifetime. And we can be that beacon for other communities to say, all right, instead of like that old thing of like, well, the next generation might get it right. Like, I'm like, fuck that shit. Like, we're going to get it right now. So the next generation can just enjoy this and not deal with this bullshit that we've had to live with. And I loved your post about, and I can't think of the name of the boulder, but you talked about like, I look forward to when the rain washes the chalk off and the name gets lost and somebody else gets a first ascent and they rename it. Like,
I don't even remember what the name of the boulder was at this point.
Which I think like totally supports this perfectly. So. But I think that's exactly right. Like there's just so much more to it. And the history is like the friendships, the successes you've had, what it taught you, what it helped get you through, what the community got you through, at least in my mind. And I don't know. I think we also have to ask, when we look to folks who came before us, are we celebrating the right aspects of those people, and are we celebrating the right people?
Right.
Yeah.
I've been talking with my climbing partners a lot lately, working on a new podcast project, and my gut reaction, my initial reaction is that I'm a fan of stripping away is the wrong word. Not putting so much value on what the first ascensionist, their choices, what they said, what they did, where they put the bolts. We as a community put a lot of emphasis on how did the first ascensionists do it? What was their style? Where did they place the bolts? How did they place the protection? What was their hand positions when they started this boulder? Mm-hmm. And they're just people. They make mistakes just like we do. There's no reason to hold first ascensionists up on this giant pedestal as if somehow they've been blessed with the ability to make better decisions than all the rest of us. I personally feel like if we were to get at the heart of the matter of changing route names, making it all more community friendly, and I know this is a very unpopular opinion, we could strip away some of that value we place on the first ascensionist. You guys aren't really talking about that. And at first I was like, I wish they would talk about this. But then I'm like, you know what? As soon as I would say that in a public forum, there's going to be a division line drawn immediately with 4 people on my side and 500 people on the other side.
Yeah. There's people who do it for recognition. I mean, I look at myself sinking in bolts, and I personally really don't care. Like, the thing that matters to me is the experience of someone coming up and saying, I climbed this route. I'm like, oh, cool. What did you think about this? Did you do this way? But also, I think about the people who taught me how to do this, and recognition matters to them. Like, they do this because, I think of, I don't know, I'm not going to say their names because I'm not sure if I'd actually have permission to say this, but I'll tell the story. It's like they talk about being a poor kid and not really having a lot. But like when they finally learned how to start bolting, granted, they were buying hardware from like Lowe's or Ace. I guess Ace hardware store was the only thing around in the 70s. So, and just sinking in bolts. And this is how that, like, this was the thing that like helped catapulted them into being able to climb, into meeting the Codwells, into doing all this stuff. So like there's been this precedent of like, bolting is the next stepping stone. If you're not going to go pro, which majority of us are not, then bolting and establishing these routes was the next step to like getting into that sponsorship or megastar or whatever it is. And I think there's been two camps. There's a minority camp that is that way, but they're usually the loudest. And I think there's been a majority camp, which I believe I fall into. Like, I just want to put routes up because I want people to climb them and I want people to be able to have fun and enjoy them. And I just want to talk about this shared experience. And I want kids and people in the future who come after me to be able to rock climb. So that's fundamentally what matters more than anything else. But this other camp, like, you're right. There is a division line
For sure.
And I think the problem is the reason why the 5,000 are on the other line is because this other camp is TikTok. It has no value. It has nothing else. It's just a bunch of dancing, but they are still things that people like. And this other thing is like, I don't know any other example to use, but like Reddit, which is a toxic wasteland in itself, but it's really open. Like all truths get laid out. And so the problem with it is how do you take away, without disenfranchising or without belittling, the group that believes that this is their stepping stone into going to where they need to go, and show to the other 5,000 that like this isn't a thing. Like, whether these people were here or not, these routes would still be established. This would still be a thing. However, because you are idolizing these people, we are persisting this problem, and that allows them to have this bad behavior.
I think you hit on it there. And, coming from a strong hip hop background, I think my method of disagreeing has very often been to belittle.
Yeah.
To make your stance seem like it doesn't matter.
Uh-huh.
And I'm learning to do better. So I think you're right.
That's very difficult to be able to do, right? Like, especially when it's something that we feel very personally strongly about, and we know we have places we want to go on our journey. And in a similar example to what you're talking about, like developing, I was out with a group. We're developing some boulders, and I've done a little bit of both boulders and routes. And it was interesting. This group that was, we're looking at these high alpine boulders in a particular area up in Wyoming, and we varied from like V4 to V13 plus climbers, and we looked at this rock, and some folks were like, "Oh, it's a great warm up rock." I'm like, "Oh, cool, right?" Like, right. I thought that might be a little harder than a warm up. And we mapped out what the moves might look like. We wire brushed, started cleaning it up, and everybody in the group, there were 5 of us, all went up a different way. All got to the exact same last hold, but used the holds differently, moved our bodies differently, or maybe threw in an extra couple, and we're like, sick, cool. Like, we're not going to demand how it should be done. We agreed that it's X grade no matter what, but it was still like, watching that, it's like we're not dictating you have to start just like this and use this side pull this certain way, and your foot has to be here. It's like, this is a stone that we are out here as friends climbing for the first time, which felt really fun for all of us, and to see that varied style. And then we actually came into a name as a group, and it took a couple of days to come up with these stupid names for these things. Names aren't stupid. We came up with stupid names,
right?
But it was, it was a really cool example of what this can be.
Yeah, I think you just laid out the best possible metaphor for all of this. We all start in the same place. We all end in the same place, and we all get there differently. And it's something I've had to really learn how to do over the last few years, and I've had some really amazing mentors, Betty from Brown Girls Climb,
Yep.
Shelma from Flash Foxy, who've really helped me learn that my experience isn't the only experience, and that I should learn to value the fact that other people have different experiences. I may not know their experience. I may not be able to relate to their experience at all. But that's not important. What's important is that they are having a different experience than I am. So I can't look at the solutions or even what the problems are through only my lens anymore. I have to understand that other people see a different problem, and if they see it, then it's real and it exists. And I think that's an important thing for a lot of people to keep in mind. That's tough to keep in mind.
Man, I really appreciate you saying that. I think that is, in conversations I've had with people who, have outright said like the whole Climb United program is laughable, that, I should quit, that the program should be kiboshed already, that the inability of them to acknowledge that people have different lived experiences is mind-boggling. And I'll be very honest, it's great with you in your position in the community to have you say that, because I have to compartmentalize those conversations and use them as data points. But it's very hurtful. It sucks to sit across from someone to think, we could potentially be friends. We both love this sport. We could go climb after this, right? But then for them to say shit like that, I'm like, oh, that's not going to happen. Right?
Yeah.
Like, and so it's very encouraging, that you are vulnerable enough to say that, on a recording to the public, to the community.
It's really, when I watched the town hall and I was watching you specifically, in preparation for this conversation, it would be very easy to think that you are this ninja level stoic that doesn't get hurt by these conversations. How in the hell and why in the hell would you want to subject yourself to that for this?
I'm a staunch believer that you use privilege with honor. And this is me using my privilege with honor. I consider myself white adjacent because of how I grew up. And there are folks out there who are hurting in ways that I'll never, ever understand or feel an ounce of. And they shouldn't have to be exposed to this. And so, in a non-toxic, like I can shield, it's simply that I can compartmentalize, and I think that gives me a duty to do this. And then, I'll filter out the hurts and such in my own time when it's right. But for now, it's definitely ensuring that I stand for, that I show up for people that should, be trying to find more joy in their lives.
That's maybe my favorite phrase I've heard in trying to understand my own role in all of this, is use your privilege with honor. That's brilliant. I don't know if you got it from somewhere, but if it's yours, or if you got it from somewhere, pretend it's yours.
Bob Dylan said he kept his hair really big because there are just these incredible songs always floating around the world. So I just figured it somehow landed in my brain. No words are ever just mine.
Nice.
So.
Amazing. I love it. That brings up something I didn't intend to talk about, but I'd like to move into a little bit. And that's, there are a lot of people who are loud on the internet in both camps. And I appreciate that. I'm glad they're out there. It lets me see what's happening on both sides. And I've talked to quite a few white or white passing or white adjacent people who get really scared by the fact that they're not doing enough, or they don't know what to do, because there are people who are loud that they think are saying to them, you should be doing more. If you're not doing this, you're not doing it right. If you're not doing this, you're not doing it enough. And as somebody who is trying to use my privilege with honor, I've felt that, but I keep in mind, they're not talking directly to me. I'm feeling a way because I saw their words, and I need to examine that, but it's on me. And I think that's the important part of it. Do you feel like you're using it with honor? Not everybody is built to do this job you're doing. Not everybody could do it, and not everyone should do it, And I think we should be using our privilege however we're built for.
Agreed.
Amazing.
I think that's an important distinction to make because, saying something like use your privilege with honor, it speaks to some people, right? And I certainly don't want it to seem like I'm trying to tell everybody who has privilege out there, like, you're not doing enough.
And it doesn't mean suit up and jump into battle. That's not what it means.
Exactly right. It has to be authentic to you and whatever that means. And you use the word loud. That's kind of like one of my privileges is I always made the joke in school, like, if the teacher asks for an answer, like, there could be a kid that started talking 3 seconds before me, but the second I started talking, they're like, oh yeah, Cody was first. It's because I'm just fucking loud, right? Yeah. So like, well, okay, I can use that.
I want to kind of throw something in here for Cody. So it really resonates with what you just said, Chris, with me, because I've always, in this whole discussion of racist root names, minorities, everything that, I've always been pretty blessed with two things. One, pretty thick skin. And my dad always taught me, he was like, if someone's racist, just make racist jokes. They'll think you're funny and then they won't know what to do. And so that's kind of that. And then, so that's always allowed me to have thick skin. And then I've always been really blessed to be around people that want the best for me. And I've met a lot of people in that situation. Devin and I even talked about that. Like, people have brought us into this thing, but and I struggled with this a lot too. And I still do struggle with this because I'm personally someone who feels like I should be more in the fight. I should be more involved, but I'm also a very tactical person. Like, my bandwidth is, I have a big bandwidth, but I want to pack a strong punch, not just shoot a buckshot.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone's listening to this, how is there any like books, resources, or thoughts, or just maybe like a train of thought that you would recommend someone wanting to step out? Because that is a big problem that I do talk to people about. Like, they're like, well, I feel like I'm not doing anything and everyone is just loud on the internet. And now I'm just this one person that is not doing a thing. And in reality, I tell them, like, no one knows that you're not doing a thing, but so it bothers you. And so, like, how would you recommend, or what would your thoughts be for someone who like wants to get into this fight, but is kind of just bewildered at what to do?
I think that it starts by finding your personal ally. And that's somebody who can hold you accountable to being authentically you when you show up in these conversations, in these spaces. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge privilege. Not everybody has that. And so if you don't have that person that you can look to and say, I know they're going to call me in on things because they care, then you got to do it to yourself. And there's so many resources out there that people can find and read, and books that can seek out. But I think it starts with asking yourself really hard questions. Like, for example, the thick skin comment, right? Like, I consider myself very much the same way because of how I grew up. I'm like, I have very thick skin, but I also have to ask, do I just stop there? Because, it's easy for people to say like, oh, if this hurts your feelings, get thick skin. It's like, well, to me, that's a snake in the grass who's lying around there waiting for something to come up that they can poke, throw like stones at, rather than saying, well, I've got thick skin so I can take it and I could show up with a bigger punch, right? Than just, seeing the world go by and saying, well, I won't let it hurt me. And then, like you said earlier, like asking yourself, like, if you hear something, someone saying folks aren't showing up, if that triggers you, ask yourself why. And you said exactly that. Like, you had to look at yourself, say, why is it that, like, I feel this is hitting me? And I think that that's how people can start to tease out how they can show up, how they can gather a big punch as opposed to, just, like I said, buckshot, just, big white choke, sending a bunch out there into the world.
Yeah.
And choke, sorry, shotgun reference.
Yeah. No, we pick up what you're putting down.
I figured you two did. I want to make sure, for folks listening. But yeah, I think it's just really looking inward, but doing it with tough questions.
Yeah, I think you have to, just as an example, because I've been vocal on my platforms, I get 5 to 10 messages every week of somebody saying, you should be reposting this. You should be talking about this.
Yeah.
And I don't want to discourage anybody from sending me those messages. First off, I appreciate that people value my voice and my position enough to send me those messages, but I'm not going to repost every one of them.
Yeah.
That's not the way I do things. I've taken a long, hard look at where my voice can be best used and how it can be best used. And I am not a rapid fire shooter. I would rather drop a bomb on you,
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I want to operate. So I'm going to share a million stories about this stuff. I'm going to save it up. I'm going to talk to somebody who really knows what they're talking about, because I don't. If you're sharing it with me and I don't know about it, I don't know about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk to someone who does. I want to put it out in an hour-long, nuanced conversation that can help people understand. So that's what I've done. I looked inward. I said, how is my voice best used? How do I feel good about it being used? That's what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to give in to the peer pressure. I will take a look at everything everyone sends me. I will consider it. But if it doesn't fit what I've decided is the way I'll interact with this, then I just won't do it. You know?
Well, and I love that you said voice and talk, because imagine if we all held conversation the way that we use Instagram, for example.
Oh my God.
In conversation, we just reposted or like reiterated words we heard all day. It would be so messed up.
Yeah,
right?
it would just be everybody saying, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Exactly.
You know?
God.
Oh
Wow.
my God. But yeah, social media has, in all of the benefits of it, it's really fucked up like public discourse and the way we talk and don't talk to one another. It's made it quite challenging in some ways.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. Don't talk. Because that's the thing that happens the most. Like most people just image, meme this, but don't talk. And you had mentioned it last night when you were talking to Pete, but like silence is the most, I grew up playing classical cello and viola. And so the most powerful part of any song is when the whole orchestra goes quiet. That's the most powerful part. And I think the problem with it is it's like we're not using that tool strategically. And like you talked about dropping a bomb on that. We've used different references, but I think it's so hard and it's so much work to be really tactical. But this whole problem is a tactical problem. You can't, this is not a sledgehammer situation. As much as we'd like it to be, it's not a sledgehammer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are people out there wielding sledgehammers, and I'm grateful for them. You know, I'm grateful that they have sledgehammers. That's not my weapon of choice, not my tool of choice. And I think it takes all the people who know how to use all the tools to build a community. And I think we have to acknowledge that those people are there for a reason.
Absolutely agreed.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I think we've glorified the sledgehammer for so long, right?
Yeah. Oh,
it has
yeah.
a purpose. It can tear down, you know, it breaks down a barrier, and then we can go in and do the work. But if you only have a sledgehammer, you can only swing that thing so long until you're tired and smack yourself in the leg or some shit.
Yeah.
Right?
Where do you see Climb United going from where you are now?
To the moon. It's got a lot. It's got a lot it's going to do. You know, we purposely made the choice to come out with the route name task force and the principles and guidelines because we had to show up with something. right?
Bold first move.
Yeah, we had a sledgehammer, right?
Yeah.
Our way into showing folks that we mean that we want to do something. You know, if we showed up and said, "Here are our plans," it's like, cool, you got some ideas. Good job. Put a lot of time into thinking about stuff, but aren't doing shit. So we want to come out of the gate. We're going to start convening organizations and brands. We were on a call with, you know, some companies that would generally by the public be seen as competing organizations, and they said this is our time to be provocative. If we can join around diversity, if we can join around these conversations of inclusivity and actually do the work, that gets people thinking. Like, wow, these are, you know, these folks don't usually work together. We have a lot of, you know, ways we want to show up in these spaces and hold forums and show up at events, work on this. And I know this is taking some like kind of public heat, the idea of like a code of conduct, but it is very analogous to leave no trace principles, right? It's simply a way to show folks. Well, I don't want to talk a whole lot about it because we're still in the very early stages.
Sure.
But it's just kind of like how we treat one another.
And I think every community, every successful community, however you define success, has to have a code of conduct amongst its community members, whether written or unwritten. It's there. And climbing has exploded the last few years. And that code of conduct isn't easily transferable through Instagram posts and through TikTok.
Exactly.
So there needs to be someone laying out these guidelines for people. You know, we have gym to crag etiquette classes that are lauded, and you know, every gym wants to have one. Every gym should have a community conduct class as well. You know?
Well, and we have, I feel like as a community, we have these kind of like this code of conduct already.
Yeah.
It's existed since day one. Ground up ethics, hand drills only, right? I mean, they're like, depending on what area you're in, there's ways to develop. There's just these certain practices we use. If this is a yabo start, if this is a sit start, if this, you know, however you're supposed to start a boulder problem, or like the line has to be climbed straight up, you can't diverge right even a little bit.
Right,
all this
right.
stuff, right? We've lived by this. Yet whenever it becomes a way how we treat one another, all of a sudden it's like, oh, holy shit, what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
We are subversive. We don't stand to rules. Like, we live by a lot of rules.
Well, I
in
think
every aspect.
I think
of
what's
society.
so interesting is that you said these companies came together and said, now's our time to be provocative. And I've seen so many comments on the internet about, this is counterculture. We are counterculture. We won't stand for this. You know, we're here because we want it to be provocative. We don't want it to be, you know, vanilla all the way across. And I'm like, you're being provoked. That's what provocative is.
Exactly.
How are you not seeing that this is punk rock? This is
Thank you. Yes.
this is going against the grain, you
Yep.
know? How can you not see that if you're getting upset about it?
Yup.
You know?
Oh man. I was in punk rock bands growing up and recorded albums, played shows in Portland, and our drummer one time, we, you know, like every good band, we cycled through drummers like crazy, and he showed up to practice one time in an Abercrombie and Fitch t-shirt. We're like, what the fuck is wrong with you? We're like getting all pissed off, and he was like,
exactly
right. He was like, this is the most punk rock thing I could do because it pissed you all off.
Oh, well played.
Yeah. That's how it feels to me. And I'm so happy that Climb United exists, that there are people taking on this fucking impossible work, you know? And I don't say impossible because it's not possible to get there. I say impossible because that's how it feels at first.
Yeah.
How many times have we walked up to a boulder problem, tried to move, and said, that's impossible? And then a week later, a month later, sometimes 2 tries later, we do the damn thing.
Exactly.
You know? as climbers, we react to impossible by leaning into it, by trying it. And this thing that Climb United is tackling seems impossible. And I think we have to lean into it. And I'm glad you're out there. I'm glad the other people in Climb United are out there. I'm glad all the people with the sledgehammers on Instagram are out there leaning into impossible.
Same.
You and this group are an important tool in that toolbox. So thanks for being there and for doing it.
Well, thank you for the kind words, the encouragement, for being part of this whole thing, right? This, when people ask like how Climb United came to be, in my mind, it's existed for a long time, right? Because of that punk rock ethos of we can always find ways to push that provocative edge. We could find ways to push culture a little bit more, and it never had a name, right? Sorry, like that kind of like collective thought, that collective energy. But you know, as a club, they said, let's give it a name. Let's give it some funding. Let's give it some energy. And I love it because, yeah, it feels impossible. And that's the greatest fucking thing in the world. Because if I walked into something that was easy, like I don't want to do this. Anyone can do this. This should already be done, right? But like this, it's like there's something about it. Like you just said, you know, you walk up to a prop for that first, you can't even start the damn thing, right? And then you just go hard at it. And like I have the dumbest motto in this, but it's try hard and then try harder. Like the second it feels impossible, I'm not trying hard enough and I'm not thinking critically enough. I'm not asking the right questions. I'm not talking to the right people. I'm not looking at all views of it. And that's really exciting because, you know, the community gets to benefit from all this collective energy that's existed for so long. And in the past couple of years, you know, so many organizations and individuals out there and affinity groups and nonprofits, they've been asking for this. They've been asking for something to happen at a national level. And you know, we're certainly not doing anything new. We're not recreating anything. We're not coming in as saviors who have all these new ideas. We're just convening folks and gathering folks around things that have already been happening, and trying to pave, you know, some sort of path into those spaces where it can be harder to find your way in, if you're don't fit the dominant culture, right?
You and I both have a great friend named May Ratz.
Yeah.
And May likes to say, nervous means do it. And I live by that motto.
Yeah, same.
And I'm glad you're following it up with try hard and try harder. I think that's an important part of that equation. So
yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the chance to bring May up.
I do it as often as I can.
You know, I've not known her long, and she is one of the most courageous humans I've ever had the privilege to know.
No question.
And you know, oftentimes going into these conversations, I would love to be stoic. I would love to be a ninja. I'm nervous as fuck.
Yeah.
In a lot of these spaces where people are like, you know, entering into it, knowing that we are not just at odds, but they think, you know, what I'm doing is dumb and what the club is doing is divisive and we shouldn't do it. You know, that's not an easy conversation to walk into, but it's the right one because I'm nervous about it, and something's gonna come of that, and it's not changing minds, and hopefully it could be changing hearts a little bit, but it's getting a view into a thought pattern and an ideology that has created a need for this work. And if we don't give that space, as hard as it is, then we're just, you know, yelling at walls, and we're not actually doing anything that is a counterculture, that is pushing that transformative, you know, momentum that we need.
Yeah. Well, Cody, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I know it's a busy week in Salt Lake City.
Yeah. World Cups.
Yeah.
Psyched.
So thank you so much for sitting down and talking through things with us.
No, thank you both. you didn't have to make the time, didn't have to stop through. I appreciate that you did. It means a lot that you're engaging this way and that you leaning in with us.
The evening after this interview, Mario and I went to a BIPOC meetup at the front that Cody was hosting, and I had the opportunity to watch Cody move around the room from group to group, and every single group of climbers that he walked over to within seconds would be beaming. And it was a beautiful thing to watch. Cody doesn't just talk about the things he believes in. He's passionate about actually doing something, doing the work. And he's a leader. And that was easy to see watching him move around this room, make people feel beyond comfortable, make them feel wanted and needed in this space that they were in. And I feel so fortunate to have been able to watch him at work and to sit down with him for this conversation. So Cody, thank you. Hopefully I see you again soon in Lander, Wyoming. You never did come back for that cereal party, but we're going to hold you to it. You all can find links to Cody and to Climb United right there in the show notes in your pocket supercomputers. I'll also include a link to the video that we mention. I'll include links to Cody's podcast, Wilder Mind. You can find us at powercompanyclimbing.com. You can find us on the Instagrams, the Facebooks, the Pinterests, all those places at Power Company Climbing. I'm sure the American Alpine Club would love to hear from you on Twitter. We would too, but we won't because we don't tweet. We scream like eagles.
Maybe don't know.
This time, 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 power, this time to build power, this time to build power, this time to build power. 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 This time to build. 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 This time. Cause Jah is the sinister character.
Audio.